So for those that online or in the room that don't know me, I'm Ben Woolford-Lim, Senior Developer at the Allotrope Foundation, and I get to talk to you about technical guides and certification. Allotrope wants to standardize data. That's one of our stated goals. We have the ASM, the simple models, as one of our mechanisms for doing that. But implementing them is sometimes, there are sometimes gaps. People aren't always clear on how to implement the standard in a standard way. So Allotrope's focus in the first half of this year, one of our focuses, is on issuing some more targeted technical guidance to help with that aspect. So this is how you should implement ASMs. This is what this term should be. This is how this structure should be used. We're also looking to launch a certification program to help end users, developers of ASM products be confident that their answer, the correct ASMs, meet the standards, and that end users purchasing or using those products can be confident that their results are going to be valid, interoperable with all of the other ASMs out there. So the aim is to improve quality of ASMs and improve the trust in products producing ASMs and the overall standard. So one of the aspects we're looking at is improving documentation. So we have plans to create a technical guide and documentation repository, a centralized site on GitLab, one of our main tools, designed to ensure that level of consistency of the ASM standards across different things, not only our internal stuff, but as Wolfgang mentioned, the idea of custom extensions to the ASM, either through the custom information document or the other structures that we have, which we'll dig into a little bit later. I think it's best if we might have that. Describing sort of the design principles behind the ASM, so you understand how we do things, why we do things, and therefore how to use them better in future. The ontological mappings, as I said, when to use this term, when to use that term, and the other kind of artifacts around that, how to use them when. So currently we have 2 drafts in that repository that's available for review by the community. The ASM extension guide around the use of custom information fields, custom schemas, custom extensions to the existing Allotrope schemas, and then the design principle guides. So this is how, if you want a new ASM model built, these are the design principles you should understand so that you can come and bring something to Allotrope that is closer to oven ready, as the saying goes. So we spend more time discussing the things that need to be done rather than getting the oven warmed up. So a little bit on the extension guide. So to Wolfgang's point, if there are terms that aren't in the existing models, either because they're specific, they just weren't part of the original use case or whatever, what do you do? Standard lab models lack some of this stuff for various reasons. It might be as if that it just wasn't part of the use case that Allotrope built, or it might be that we determined that it wasn't suitable at that point in time. So Allotrope has built-in mechanisms for extensions, custom extensions that allow you to tuck that kind of data into the existing models without breaking validation of the existing structures. You get the best of both worlds as a result, because you have all of the ASM standard data, the common stuff that's the same regardless of whether it's one vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. All of that works as expected without any problems. You can still have these custom fields, this extra data that is unique to vendor A, or unique to scientist B in the lab who really wants this particular calculation to be included. So these structures allow you to include these extra fields without breaking what we already have, and maintaining the core semantics of the Allotrope models. It's important to note that use of these structures varies depending on your membership level. If you're looking to implement custom extensions, sort of extending the Allotrope schemas, that may require use of the Allotrope membership license as opposed to the Creative Commons license that is available to the general public. So as I mentioned, there's 2 parts. The simple one, quick add, is essentially the custom information, and this is literally just a key value structure inside the existing ASMs. It's very, very simple. You basically say, here is a label, here is a value. the value can be, string, it can be, a value, a number with a unit, Boolean. I think the three main options we've discussed, potentially actually a data cube there, but that's still in progress. It's very good if you just have a couple of things that you need to add that aren't in the existing format, maybe aren't worth adding to the Allotrope structure because they're business internal, or have already been decided as they aren't suitable for, because they're vendor specific, something like that. There's no technical change required. It's literally just a key value pair in the existing structure. The downside is that you don't have any management because it's literally a string to say, custom field number 1. You don't have an ontology term backing that. So if you want the semantics behind that, won't have that with this approach. So, and as it says, if you think this is something that should be in the existing model that we just didn't capture because it wasn't part of the use case or wasn't brought up, you can, of course, submit a governance request and we can review it to include it in the overall model. But this at least gets you started down that path. So an example, so you have the custom information aggregate document, the aggregate document being how we aggregate data in an ASM, and then individual custom information documents have a string data label, a string value, a timestamp, a Boolean, and so on and so forth. So you pick your labels, you pick your values, put it in, it validates as expected. The schema validation will not check individual values, it's just a string of values. So all it will do is make sure that you have some text, and if it's a string, it's also some text. It won't tell you that your brand name is table. It won't do any kind of content check. You can't enforce that, but it gives you the space to do this. The slightly more involved approach, the more formal framework, as it's apparently been called, is essentially extending the Allotrope schemas. So Allotrope's models are based on the open world assumption. You can always add things that are extra to what we include, and the validation will essentially ignore it. It will go, okay, that's fine. If I don't understand it, but it's not wrong by my schema, that's okay. This allows you to then validate the Allotrope content using the Allotrope schemas, but then add an additional custom extension, so to, your own schema to say, and this is how we validate the bits that are on top of the Allotrope schema. So that's that allows you to provide the semantics and more in-depth structuring than just a simple key value pair. I want to capture information about a concept that Allotrope hasn't done. A chromatography column, if we hadn't done that, you could do a chromatography column document inside the thing. You could add something and say, and this is the information we want to include. That would be a way of capturing that without breaking the existing Allotrope structures. The downside is you need to create your own schema, you need to manage it, you need to make sure that the licensing approach is appropriate. If you're modifying the existing schemas, you need the Allotrope membership license and so on and so forth for that. But it does give you more control. One point that's on the screen that's important to note is you can make existing optional content mandatory in your custom schemas. You can't do the reverse. If you make something optional that is something mandatory that is optional, that essentially means your data validates. But if you make something optional, if you make something mandatory optional, then you will have the inverse problem. You'll have existing data that should pass will fail because the mandatory fields are no longer present. The options are no longer present. So that's one caveat that's worth noting with that approach. So an example, so you can create a custom manifest to basically state, okay, the manifest's what Allotrope uses to determine this is the appropriate schema, this is the appropriate vocabulary, and this is the model that we're matching it against. In order to create a custom extension, you need to create a custom schema and then a custom manifest to say these are the appropriate schemas to use, both the Allotrope one and your extra custom schema, and likewise the Allotrope vocabulary, the ontology, and your extra custom vocabulary to say these are the terms we want to use. And then so that was the manifest, and then this is the schema. So just adding an extra couple of bits to the automated reactors example in this case to add a term for reaction type that can have as valid values chemical reaction, clean out, and fermentation. And you can see at the bottom it's now required. So an existing ASM using this extra scheme would be required to add this reaction type field with one of those three values and would no longer pass the custom validation. Existing Allotrope files without this custom schema would work, and this file, a file passing this schema would still pass the existing Allotrope schema, because this is basically just adding an extra check. So if you have the opportunity to take a look at this documentation, it's available on the public GitLab site, so you don't have to be an Allotrope member to access it. Please provide your feedback to the product team, give your thoughts on, does documentation make sense? Does it meet your needs? What can we do better, both in the content, but also in the structure, the presentation of the documentation? What can we make easier to understand? Another aspect is the certification program that we've been working on, and in particular has been working very hard on this one, so all credit to him on that. So this is still draft, it's still in flight, so things may change, so please don't be surprised if little tweaks happen around the edges. But in the Q1 release of this quarter, of this year, Allotrope announced the pilot launch of our certification program to try and build this quality and trust into the process. The current pilot phase is really just about ensuring that existing files being generated validate against the Allotrope schema. From discussions with various vendors and members, we've learned that not everyone is actually validating their files against the Allotrope schemas, which means that you have the structures, but you're not. There's no guarantee that they're actually correct because the validation process isn't being run. So this initial stage is essentially just trying to lower that barrier to entry, making it easier for folks to be able to submit their files and feel that confidence that the validation is happening and the files that are coming out are correct according to the Allotrope standards. As we evolve this program, the hope is that we'll be able to expand that, add further levels of certification beyond just we pass the validation, but we also match the Allotrope design patterns, include things like custom extensions that following the approaches that Allotrope suggests. We're putting the content in the right places, but also using the appropriate patterns when content doesn't exist within the Allotrope format, and so on. So to add those extra layers of quality and trust, so that there's more consistency in both how the data is stored and how you can access it going forward. The hope is that we'll have the program fully complete, at least the first level by the middle of this year, and then look to expand, open out ASM certification to the wider community to allow the use of the term ASM certified as a branding approach. Shout out to Lablicate for the initial POC testing, thanks for that. And again, likewise on the ASM certification repository on GitLab, you can access the documentation, take a look, and I think you need to get into touch with the acronym at the moment to test it further. We will be expanding that hopefully over the next quarter to make it more easily accessible. So as I said, the point of this certification program is to build confidence in both the ASM standard and the implementations that use it. We want to ensure that the data is consistent, interoperable across different vendors, different techniques, different approaches, lowering that barrier to make sure that your data works, that it flows and is fair, as everyone likes to claim. So the hope is by opening that certification, we can assist developers in identifying the debugging tools by providing an example of the things we use and can use internally to do this. We can assist developers doing this work ahead of time to develop their solutions without needing to close the loop with Allotrope too often. We're hoping that promote industry trust and recognition of ASMs as a usable standard, and particularly of the certification of the individual products. We look to provide official recognition of the term ASM certified through a logo and in a product catalog published on the website to say these products have been certified by Allotrope as compliant with ASM for use going forward. It also opens up co-branding opportunities, marketing through Allotrope for your ASM certified software. So again, still in draft, so tweaks may happen, but the intent is that you can certify your software for a period of around 24 months, 2 years. So you submit your software certification through the sort of established process. You pass the certification process. You get a 2-year certification period. After that, a new model release would require recertification of your software to ensure that model releases and model updates are still being maintained by certified products. Renewal will be required only after that 24-month period that has expired if a new version of the model is released. If we haven't changed it, of course, you're still certified because there's no change, there's nothing to recertify against. Organizations are expected to update towards the the new ASM versions as the model evolves. So if there is an update during the process, the intent is that organizations should aim to update their software in line with ASM model updates to maintain certification. In order to certify, an organization would need to submit 3 versions of an ASM data instance from production software in order to make sure that a single value is not just a fluke. So we've got a reasonable spread of examples to check against, and as well as supporting artifacts, so the raw data files, ideally, that went into the generation of those ASM artifacts, and the technical documentation of that conversion process should be included if they exist. At the moment, we're looking at using a GitLab private repository in order to manage that data, which means that the proprietary content, the proprietary data files stay proprietary and don't escape into the wider world. In terms of recertification, breaking changes in the ASM would essentially extend, would encourage recertification, and major version updates to your existing software would require a recertification, because if you change your software significantly enough, it's important to make sure that it still validates and produces the correct ASM versions. Minor bug fixes may be recertified within that request period, but the major ones would be expected to be. So, and in terms of costing at the moment, the current thinking is that certification would be a membership privilege for Allotrope members at no additional cost. Again, I think that's subject to discussion, but all these things are. So the tooling and the certification program as a whole aims to provide a centralized governance infrastructure, a central hub for CI/CD tools and validation for your software. So at the very least, in the example, this is how you can validate, and a central place to find that. In order to keep things secure, we are using private sandboxing, as said, the GitLab private repositories, to make sure that data doesn't leak outside. Confidential information remains confidential. We're enforcing the JSON Schema 2012 standard, which is what we've been using throughout. But as I said, since validation hasn't always been happening, this helps us to enforce it and ensure that it's being applied correctly. The validation engine itself provides the schema validations in a nice single file, including tracking, so you can essentially see where your files went wrong if they did, and hone down to what you need to fix. Certification workflow basically is a press play, you submit the files that are required, hit the go button, and it spits out, yes, you passed, no, you didn't, here's what you went wrong. If you passed, it spits out a compliance report and a signed digital certificates that you can use to say, we are ASM certified. Good job. And I think this is basically a bunch of pictures of the pipeline as described. So you submit your files, or you submit your information. So we need to know who we're making our certificates of well done out to. You submit example files in JSON format. You can basically run the GitLab pipeline, which is the tool that we're using to generate the validation requests and everything else on top of that. So you can see there's a diagnostic log if there are any problems other than the specific JSON validation. You can see them here, and it will generate a set of results with the validation log, the proof of certificate if one applies, and then the specific bits and bobs, these things succeeded or there were errors. So you can see the actual log. So this is where it went wrong and why. And then a not very pretty yet, we're working on it, certificate to say this product of this version from this vendor on this date has been certified by the ASM validation process. So again, we'll roll through, make things look nicer, but as a starting point, that's where it is. So yeah, if you're interested in that, as I said, the link's available. I think at the moment it's only accessible to Allotrope members, and I think we might need to give specific access, but I'll defer to Amnon on that. If you have questions, comments, interest in that, please feel free to try the link, or if you have questions generally, now's the time.